Welcome to the world of the mind. I'm Dr. Matthew Sharps. If you've seen our videos before, you know that we divide the world of the mind into three streams. One on the mind itself, one on ideas about the mind, and one on the extremes, where human minds really are driven to the edge. This is the second of our videos in the Mind series. In our last video on this series, we talked about learning, about the basic nature of learning. And we saw that if we just look at the bases of learning, the different kinds of conditioning, we do a lot better to go beyond that, to start looking at what the mind is really doing with that learning and what happens with learning in different settings. But today we're going to start talking about memory, about the nature of memory itself, which is awfully damned important, because if you think about it, pretty much everything in the world that you know or think you know is in your memory. Your memory, in a very real sense, is very much a part of you, okay? What kind of person are you? You remember that. Where did you live? Under what circumstances? What did you do? So memory is very, very crucial to us. We're going to start to explore that in the next few videos in this stream. Now, what do we really know about memory? Well, as information enters the brain, we know that it becomes consolidated. And that's a wonderful word, meaning to move from the relatively short term to the relatively long term. We even know what structure of the brain that happens in. It's a midbrain structure called the hippocampus, which is a wonderful Greek word meaning seahorse, because the hippocampus is actually shaped kind of like a couple of seahorses. It's toward the middle of your brain in the limbic system, a part of the brain we share with many other living creatures. But we're not going to focus today on the brain itself. We're going to focus on memory and what's actually happening with memory. And in general, we divide memory into three basic levels. Now, this isn't exactly completely accurate. We're going to see that in a little more detail later, but we have to start somewhere. So when information enters your head through your various sense organs, it seems initially to enter sensory memory. Now, sensory memory is a very peculiar thing. The information seems to hang around for about a quarter to a half a second before it's passed on to more complex levels of memory, and that's extremely weird, because we now know that the information that is taken in by your senses, pretty much all of it seems to stick around for about half a second before you get rid of all the bits that you really don't need or want. Now, that's an amazing problem, because we don't know how in that much time you could possibly decide which bits are the most important. Right now, if you're listening to me, you're probably listening to my voice. You may be looking at me because we get cues to what people are saying and what they're thinking about from looking at their face. You're probably ignoring the globe back there and the books over there. How your mind knows how to do that, we're not quite clear, but every half second, every quarter to half a second, this is happening. Everything in the world is smacking you in the face, and all of it except the good bits seem to be disappearing. And we will actually have a video devoted to that much later in this series. But for the moment, what happens to that information once it gets through the sensory memory, which for psychology students is also called the sensory store, the sensory register? What happens? Well, the information enters what is typically referred to as short-term memory. Now, you don't hear that term a lot anymore in scientific, experimental psychology. You do still hear it in clinical and school psychology, the idea of short-term memory. Why don't we use it as much? Because it doesn't cover as much ground as the concept of working memory, okay? We really need to understand how the mind deals with pictures as opposed to words, as opposed to other verbal stimuli. So working memory, the models of that are a bit more complex and a bit larger. But for the moment, we're basically going to use that as a synonym. What is short-term or working memory? Well, it has limits. The limit seems to be that generally it can operate for about 15 to 30 seconds. Now, that's not entirely accurate either, because what we think is happening in working or short-term memory is the information gets into the hippocampus, gets consolidated into long-term memory, and that process may take 15 to 30 seconds, but there are all sorts of problems with that. If we whack you in the head hard enough, you may lose some memory, and amnesia, you may lose 2 to 3 minutes is fairly common. Well, does that mean working memory takes 2 to 3 minutes? We know that memory is still rather active for a night's sleep. You put a night's sleep in there, and you remember better than if you didn't. So obviously the mind was still working on that during the night's sleep, so it's very, very complicated. Okay, but that 15 to 30 seconds part, well, that seems to be most of when you do this wonderful consolidation you're doing. But what is it that you're actually consolidating? It's a lot more important to most of us than the rate at which this happens. Well, the human mind, human memory, works in terms of organized units. And an organized unit of information, this is important for our talk today, and it's going to be important for the next couple of talks we do in this series. An organized unit of information, we have an actual technical term for that, and God help us, that term is a chunk. A chunk of information is an organized unit of information. I'm sorry, it's not a very impressive technical term, but it's the best we have. Now, what kind of thing can be a chunk? Well, it depends on your level of knowledge, doesn't it? Suppose we have three objects or the number 3. Well, that can be a chunk. I can see right here on my desk, there's a cell phone, a book, and a pencil. Well, that's 3. Okay? So 3 can be a chunk. But let's take 3, 5, 7. Well, that could be 3 chunks. I'm going to have to remember 3 and 5 and 7. But it could also be an organized unit. If I like mathematics, it might be the odd numbers from 3 to 7. Or if I like mathematics a bit more, it could be the prime numbers from 3 to 7. Or if I know something about guns and ammunition, it could be 357 as in 357 Magnum. It's a chunk. Okay? Now that's a little unsatisfactory because depending on your expertise, a chunk could be anything from 3 to the geography of Colorado. So you've got a kind of an interesting problem there. It's not the best term in the world, but we operate with it because there's a limit on our working memory. That limit seems to be, and we always talk about that, is 7. Short-term memory, working memory, seems to be able to operate with about 7 chunks at any given time, plus or minus 2. So the idea is, and this has been around since 1956, okay? The idea is that we can handle about 7 units or chunks of information. Now the problem is, I'm sorry, there's all these problems. That isn't exactly true either. Have you ever heard anybody say a phone number? Does anybody ever say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Of course not. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They make a 3 and a 4 out of it. A social security number, it's only 9 numbers. You'd think you just say all 9 because we can handle 7 plus or minus 2, right? Nobody does. It's the 3 numbers and the 2 numbers and the 4 numbers. Now, the social security people have broken that up nicely for us, but we all go along with it, don't we? The zip code. When I talk to college students, say, how many of you know your zip code? They're all very proud. Yes, I know my zip code. Yes, well, it's 5 numbers, isn't it? Okay, so, oh, yes, we know our zip code. Hooray for us. I go, what about your zip plus 4? And they go, oh, crap, that thing. 9's pushing it. Even 7 is pushing it. And in fact, the psychologist Mandler had a very long career. He's published his first work on this in the 1960s. His latest work was published just a very few years ago in this decade. Mandler says, okay, fair enough, you can handle 7 plus or minus 2 units, 7 chunks, whatever you want, but you don't do it very well. You operate much better in what he called rehearsal groups. And his most recent research on that, and the other research seems to follow along with it, is 3 to 5. Our best memory is dealing with 3 to 5 things at a time. Now, if you're a student, some people listening to this will be students, you want to make flashcards to help you remember things, etc. Well, you've only got so many flashcards, so you try to write everything down on the damn flashcard to feel better. Just one flashcard. Yes, okay, we got it. No. 3 to 5 things per card. And I've discovered this, I found this in some work I did many years ago. That often works better if you arrange these things in space. Okay? Here's my 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. I can now remember these 3. And if I suppose I got 15 things to remember, well, a little matrix of 3 by 5. Okay, 3 cards here, 5 cards there, with the things on them. It can help me remember. These are very practical technologies that we're going to be talking about as we go over the next couple of videos in this series. Things that are very useful for you. In fact, if you paid a bit of attention to our last video on learning, we talked about the situation that can change the nature of learning in the case of operant conditioning. I'll sometimes have college students come to me and they're having trouble with their classes. So what we'll basically do is give them a variety of knowledge about their own memory. And that's a wonderful word, meta-memory. It means your knowledge about your own memory. Your knowledge about memory, I should say. Okay. If they learn the techniques and they do them right, their grades tend to go up someplace between 15 and 30%. Now, that's not guaranteed for everybody. You have to put some work in on it. But it's very useful to know about your memory. And the fact is, if you're trying to remember 7 things at a time or 9 things at a time, well, good bloody luck with it. It says in the books, yeah, short-term memory is 7 plus or minus 2, yeah, 3 to 5. That's what we can really handle. Why? God only knows. But short-term memory, working memory, does that. So the course of memory is this. sensory memory, which lasts for a very brief time, about half a second. Everything gets in, then all of it vanishes except the good bits. We have no idea how you compute the good bits. There are ideas about it we really don't know. But from there, you move into this wonderful working or short-term memory. It takes 15 to 30 seconds is about the main limit of most of what's happening in there. It's very unsatisfactory. But you can handle 7 plus or minus 2 chunks. And don't forget, if you're going to be with us for the next few videos, don't forget about those damn chunks. They're important, organized units of information. And although you can handle 7 plus or minus 2, 3 to 5 works a hell of a lot better. But most of the books say, okay, at that point, memory enters long-term memory. And you read the cognitive textbooks, it basically suggests that long-term memory is eternal and unchanging. Right. If you saw the very first video in the world of the mind, our introductory video, I talked a bit about my own background. A lot of it is in forensic cognitive science, and I've consulted on quite a number, actually, of criminal cases as a consulting investigative psychologist, mostly violent crime. And in such cases, eyewitness memory is extremely important. Now, I may be trespassing a bit into our other stream, the extremes, because we talk over there quite a bit about forensic psychology and about eyewitness psychology. But here's the problem. How shall I put this technically? Eyewitness memory kind of sucks. Okay, it's often very, very bad. Now, sometimes it's accurate. We got that going for us. But lots of times it's completely wrong, and that's a problem because people don't really think that's the case. Okay, it seems very likely that the most important factor that puts the wrong person in prison, it gets the innocent convicted, is faulty eyewitness testimony. Now, people do lie about other people. That happens all the time. Academics don't usually like to talk about it, but it does happen. But lots of people are absolutely certain that they saw such and such a thing happen, and they were incredibly wrong. A case I will touch back on a number of times was one I worked on. It was a homicide case. The case wound up turning a great deal on the weapon involved. Well, the lady who was the witness saw the weapon, and it was a large semi-automatic pistol. Well, then the ballistics proved that couldn't have been the gun. Well, then she remembers with the same intensity, and she wasn't lying. She just really believed it. Now, I must have made a mistake. It was a revolver. Well, then it turned out that one of the, not to be too indelicate about it, one of the holes in the dead guy didn't seem to have bullet fragments in it. Well, now she remembers there was some kind of gun there, but not an automatic or revolver at all. Now she remembers it being an ice pick. Well, then it turned out there really were bullet fragments down there. So now it's some kind of gun, but I don't know what kind. The damn weapon changed it again and again and again, and we have to explain that. Now, we're not going to explain it in this video. That's coming up as we go, but we can't really get there yet because we don't have enough information. The problem is this. Long-term memory is not eternal and unchanging. It changes all the damn time. Okay? The single most convincing factor to the average juror is the confident, credible, and attractive eyewitness. There's studies indicating that attractiveness matters to the witness. So, important point we're going to give you in this video. Okay? If you're ever accused of a major crime, make certain that the witnesses are very ugly people. Okay, you want to only be accused by deeply ugly people. You need that. Good luck with that one. But, memories change. Long-term memory change. How is that possible? Well, people tend to think of memory as relatively permanent. Now, they know bits and pieces get lost. That's forgetting. Okay? You may remember your vacation to Hawaii or Vegas or Yellowstone, wherever you want. You took a plane, right? And you remember the beautiful trees or the beautiful the surf or whatever else. Great. Okay, you have the memory. I can guarantee you don't remember your seat number. Now, for about 15 minutes getting on the plane, that seat number was absolutely critical to you, wasn't it? But you forget it. Of course you forget. Everybody knows that. An analogy I like to use in my classes is, you remember those old, you can't get them anymore, but those really nice jigsaw puzzles. They're made out of wood, and you had a wooden frame. You could hang the thing on the wall afterwards. Well, they were very, very well put together. Suppose you took one of those. It's a picture of, I don't care what, a barnyard or a pig, whatever you want. You take it and you hold it upside down and give it one quick shake. Okay. Now, a few pieces are going to fall out, right? That's forgetting. You turn the thing back right side up. It's still a picture of a barnyard or a pig with just a few bits missing. Okay, it's obvious the memory itself remains fairly static. So we've got that going for us. Memory is the most important thing because it's who we are. What do I like? What do I dislike? What are the kinds of people I enjoy being around? Do I like this? Do I like that? All that's in my memory. And I have a terrible problem saying to myself, no, maybe that's not exactly right. Really? Many people listening to this may at some time have been in a romantic relationship that ended. May have been broken up, maybe be divorced, okay? Now, the significant other, the former wonderful person who is now considered a bloody swine, their story of the breakup and your story of the breakup, do they bear any resemblance to each other? And when I ask that question in public talks or in classes, I have people kind of go, some well-adjusted people go, no. Other people go, no. Some people go, no. Depends on how much rage is involved. But here's the problem. I know my account is right because, hell, I'm me. But what if the memories have been changed? What if they've been changed the way I need them to be so that my conduct was much better during the breakup or the divorce and his or her conduct was god-awful? Okay, basically find you were married to Darth Vader. Okay? Marriage counselors and divorce lawyers are very familiar with this, that the stories are never the same. And now sometimes people are lying, of course, but is it possible that memories are just changed? And even though in court, many times I've seen people treating memory as if, oh no, it's a veridical or a veridical record of the past. It's not. And that was demonstrated almost 100 years ago by a psychologist named Bartlett in 1932. He wrote a wonderful book. It's called Remembering, and it's absolutely worth reading even today. Bartlett did some experiments that are often pretty much attacked by people like me, experimental psychologists. Oh, they weren't exactly with proper methodology, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's true. Okay, they're not models we would use in modern classes, but they still teach us a hell of a lot. Okay. I have here a wonderful book. It's the Cambridge edition of Bartlett's wonderful book, Remembering. What you're looking at there is one of Bartlett's experiments. Now look at this white figure up here. Oh, sorry, the text is backwards, but look at this white figure up here. Believe it or not, that thing was a piece of modern art. People would hang it on their wall, for God's sake. And it was called, in French, portrait d'homme, portrait of a man, okay? Now, if you look at the thing, it's not really a portrait of a man at all, is it? It looks like a horrifyingly badly drawn kind of football, evil, demonic football with serious dental problems, okay? So it's a portrait of a man. Well, great. So you've seen this picture. Great, wonderful, all right. Now, all you knew about it is it's a portrait of a man. And Bartlett's experiment, it was so simple. He says to people, you remember that picture I showed you the other day? Draw it for me. And this wonderful cover of the Cambridge book shows this, doesn't it? Because here are initial drawings. Now, they don't look that much like a man, but you see, they're already softening some of these angles into these mustaches, and God knows what's going on up here. You start to get this kind of egg wearing a Santa Claus mustache, but over days and weeks, it starts to look more and more like a human being with different drawings. And over some time, well, see this one down here. This is how people like me who can't draw, but it's at least obviously a code for a human face. Here's somebody's got some artistic talent, okay? And you can actually see the facial expression. My God, you go from this demented football to this with the dental problems to this. I don't know what to do with this one here. I think this person wound up on the news sometime, okay? But the point is, the portrait d'homme, the abstraction of the demented, dentally impaired football becomes, depending on your artistic talent, either the kind of person like me that can't draw, a kind of coded, almost unhappy, happy face, to somebody who can draw. You can even see the facial expression on this truly portrait of a man. Memory changes, says Bartlett. Now, I should make this clear. There has been one modern attempt to replicate this specific effect, and the authors, the psychologists, failed to replicate it. They didn't get the same result. Well, that happens a lot, but it doesn't mean in anything this complex that the result doesn't happen. And indeed, some of Bartlett's results have been replicated in other laboratories in the modern world, including my own. Because although the portrait of a man thing, and whether or not you say, do we get this every time? No, we definitely do not. Can we get it? Yes. Okay, because that lady who was the witness had a picture in her mind, didn't she? Of an automatic, then a revolver, ultimately an ice pick. Bartlett also did some amazing stories too. He'd have these stories from Native American mythology, okay, that were written for anthropologists, so they're absolutely literal, okay, including linguistic oddities, okay, by our standards, the linguistic oddities. And Bartlett then has the English translation read by his was in England, his British research respondents, and he discovered they were not only making the whole account much shorter, getting it much, much less information, But they started changing even the motivations to fit the way English people, as opposed to Native Americans, think. And Bartlett showed that there is reconfiguration of long-term memory. It's not always the same. It's not eternal and changing. Memory changes in three directions. One is brevity. The memory gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay? You remember the hotel you went to in Hawaii, but you probably don't remember the name tag on the person who checked you in. You absolutely don't remember your seat number on the plane over there. You may not even remember the layout of your room, etc., etc. Okay? The memories get shorter. There's reconfiguration in the direction of brevity. And this means there's reconfiguration in the direction of gist. What you have is the rough core of the memory. Oh, yes, you remember when we were in Hawaii? Yes, we went to beaches. You may not even remember what the beaches were. And these effects get even worse. And this is something, welcome to my nightmare, and eyewitness testimony, eyewitness memory. These differences are far worse under stress, as you saw briefly in our last video. As we get under stress, the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain where we do a lot of our thinking and reasoning and analyzing, doesn't get as many resources, okay? And people don't understand this. I've been in court many times. Well, here's a poor witness who was robbed. It's a terrifying thing. People believe somehow that stress makes you better at remembering, And so the lawyer is saying to the poor storekeeper, no, you don't get robbed every day, do you? No, sir, I don't get robbed. You've never been robbed? No, I haven't been robbed. So you have a great memory of this, don't you? You remember this? Oh, yes, sir, I'll remember this to my dying day, okay? And the story that comes out is absolute rubbish. Because here's what people tend to remember who were robbed. If it was violent robbery, they were very aroused, very upset. Okay? They tend to remember this. I was robbed! Well, they may have a few more details than that, but you have the core, the gist. And so what? So we see exactly what happens in your divorce or your breakup. There's change in memory. It gets shorter. You get the core of it. Now that means you have more possibility to add details that are not correct. What kind of details? Bartlett showed in his wonderful book right here, he shows that memory changes in the direction of brevity, memory changes in the direction of gist, but the really scary one is memory changes in the direction of personal belief. You don't believe you could have acted like that during a divorce, so in your memory, you didn't. And your formerly loved spouse, who is now not your favorite person, they basically were a cross between Darth Vader and Hitler. You get the general idea. We see this all the time. Some of the best work on this ever was done by Elizabeth Loftus, a great psychologist, who really founded our modern study of eyewitness memory. Okay? And Loftus did wonderful studies where she'd have a car, a film of a car bumping into another car. I believe they were going about 15 miles an hour. Okay? And she'd ask people, well, how fast was the car going when it bumped into the other car? And people's memory was pretty good of that. It was within a few miles an hour of 15. They're getting it right. And then Dr. Loftus would ask, okay, did you see the broken glass? Well, there wasn't any broken glass. And people tend to say, no, I didn't see any broken glass at all. No, it must have been something else. Well, then they simply changed the language. Instead of asking how fast was the car going when it bumped into the other cars, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other car? Okay, they changed their language. Okay, it smashed into the other car. Suddenly people are going 30 miles an hour. They're making the car going faster. Different people give you different speeds, but faster. And now she goes, did you see the broken glass? Yeah, man, there was broken glass all over and human heads rolling around in blood. Now, okay, maybe not quite that far. But a lot of people saw the broken glass, and there wasn't any. Can you imagine this in a real criminal case? Did you see the weapon? Yes, I did. It was a .45 automatic. No, it was a .38 revolver. No, it was an ice pick. This kind of thing happens all the time. It gets even weirder. It's amazing how much research hasn't been done in psychology. Whenever students come to me and say, well, I don't know if there's anything else to be done in psychology, my other professor said, oh, well, the important work has been done. No, it hasn't. Everywhere you look, there's stuff we don't understand at all. We didn't have a good taxonomy, a good natural history of what kinds of mistakes people make in eyewitness sittings until I and my students, my research students, we published this in 2009. It wasn't that long ago. So what we did with help from our law enforcement colleagues, and by the way, don't try this at home. Okay, do not. Our safety precautions were epic. We had when we did this, we had ourselves supervised by law enforcement people to make sure this was correct. But in some of our studies, it looks like we have somebody aiming a gun at somebody else. We did some of that with trick photography. Some of it was by putting the gun. Anyway, we had very great safety precautions. Don't try this at home. The point is, we have these various scenes that our law enforcement colleagues tell us, yeah, that kind of thing happens all the time. And we looked at whether or not people get them right as eyewitnesses. Now, realize the people seeing these scenes are not under any stress. They're not under any of the stress that can cause problems with your prefrontal cortex. Okay? They could be sitting there eating popcorn. They weren't. And we do all our stuff with good lighting and without things in the way, in actual studies. And we'll do this in other videos, both here in this stream, the mind, and also over in another stream, the extremes. We'll talk more about this. But under ideal conditions, what happens? People make mistakes. There's lots of kinds of mistakes, aren't there? There's the physique and the clothing of the perpetrator. There's were there trees, what kind of environmental things were there, and so cross-racial ID. That's a huge question. Well, do people make mistakes? Oh, yeah. Under ideal viewing conditions, the average person made, the number was 1.88, okay, but 188%, 2 errors of the physique and the clothing of the perpetrator. It's amazing. Well, it's not that surprising, I guess, though. What about other kinds of errors? Well, I thought when we started this that we'd start seeing people making more errors about the environment and about this and that. What was the number 2 error? The number 2 was errors of the imagination. 1.24, 124%. The average person, under ideal viewing conditions, just made stuff up. We got 1.25 things they made up. Our word is confabulated. Okay, when you make stuff up, but you don't know you're doing it. 1.25 errors under ideal viewing conditions. Can you imagine the problems here? In one of our studies, we have a static photograph of a crime situation. This particular one looks like you've got a perpetrator aiming a gun at a victim. And see, the reason we do this is we can vary these things systematically. So we can have a male perpetrator and a female victim, or we can have a male victim and a female perpetrator, same sex, different sexes, different amounts of stuff in the environment. It's very systematic. We've been doing this for years and years and years. But in one of our photographs, we asked people afterwards, what do you remember happening next? And once we got results, we started changing the language to make absolutely sure. We're saying, what is your memory of what happened after this photograph? Okay, not, tell us a story, Grandpa. Not, well, let's hear your imagination. Now, let's have your spec script or fanfic. No. We made damn sure they were talking about their memory. Now, there's only one possible answer to that. Dude, it's a photograph. Nothing happened next. Okay. People told us. One person, or seen as a guy who looks like he's aiming, in this case, a guy who looks like he's aiming a gun at this lady is not. We use photography for that. But a point being, one person remembered fire and explosions. One of my research students said, and she may be right, that this came from a movie that she had seen too the night before. Somebody else had a guy drive up in a car and drive away with the perpetrator. In one of our scenes, there's a ladder against the house where we're doing this, and somebody remembers him climbing up the ladder, dragging her up there. Okay, my personal favorite, was one lady, who comes up and says, she turned and faced him in a violent manner, and within 21 feet, she gave us a number on the number of feet. It was absolutely amazing. Okay. Now remember, the most convincing thing to a jury is what? The confident, credible, and attractive eyewitness. And you can be attractive in different ways. I mean, you can be sexy, but suppose you're older, you're not quite as, it depends who you are. Okay, we're not going to say anything bad about anybody. But, you can imagine somebody who really looks well put together. You'd like them to be your mom, or you'd like them to be your boss. They can be attractive in that sense too, can't they? And confidence is a very big deal. That's a huge problem for us right now, because in large groups, confidence does predict your accuracy. Well, in individual cases, you really don't have any prediction there. As to the attractiveness factor, just make damn sure if you're ever accused by anybody that they're very, very ugly people, okay? But can you imagine the jury's response to this lady? She turned and faced him, whatever the number of feet was. She turned and faced him in a violent manner within 18 feet. Wow, she must have practically measured. Boy, does she remember that. And look how confident she is. You ever meet anybody who's very, very confident and at the same time has no idea what they're talking about? But I guarantee this lady would have been a great witness, even though her memory was completely inaccurate. We have to deal with these facts of memory. Memory does not work very well. But there are things you can do with memory. There are things you can do if you understand memory, if you have that knowledge of that wonderful word, meta-memory, your knowledge about memory. That it may not make your memory perfect, but it can improve it quite a bit. We're going to be discussing those in the next couple of videos here in our stream, The Mind, as part of the world of the mind. I'm Dr. Matthew Sharps. Please do subscribe if you feel like it. And until next time.